Since their origins in the late 19th century, the modern Olympic Games have emphasized athletic prowess and friendly, participatory competition via their official mottos: faster, higher, stronger, and the most important thing is not to win, but to take part. In contrast, the 1980 and 1984 Olympic Games significantly undermined these values and instead served to reflect and heighten the increasing Cold War tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. First, the 1980 Olympics, hosted in Moscow, were boycotted by the United States and other supporting nations in protest of the Soviet Union's human rights violations and invasion of Afghanistan. Second, the 1984 Olympics, hosted in Los Angeles, were boycotted by the Soviet Union and the majority of its Eastern Bloc allies due to a combination of the US-led boycott of 1980 and a competitiveness which sought to undermine the capitalistic 1984 Games. The notion of a boycott of the 1980 Olympics had been building in momentum ever since Moscow had been announced as the host city in 1974. Despite both the USA and the USSR engaging in an easing of tensions known as détente throughout the 1970s, the initial opposition to the Moscow Olympics was based on simmering Cold War tensions surrounding human rights. Various organizations quickly emerged in the West to denounce Moscow's hosting of the Games, and began suggesting an Olympic boycott in protest of the Soviet Union's human rights violations and its unfair treatment of dissidents. Then, Cold War tensions further increased when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, signalling an end to the period of détente. From this point, efforts to boycott the 1980 Olympics rapidly gathered momentum and gained powerful political support. According to Umberto Tulli, the US President Jimmy Carter responded to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan within 2 weeks by introducing various anti-Soviet policies, including the promotion of an Olympic boycott. The Cold War tensions surrounding the violation of human rights by the Soviet Union, combined with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, eventually led to a complete boycott of the Games by the United States, Canada, West Germany, and Israel, and partial boycotts by many other nations, leading to only 80 countries competing, a disappointingly low turnout. To continue to add intrigue and international drama, the 1984 Olympics were awarded to Los Angeles in the USA. This only served to heighten Cold War strains between the two nations. As a result of the dramatic US-led boycott of Moscow, it seemed hardly surprising that the 1984 Olympics were subsequently boycotted by the Soviets and 13 other Eastern Bloc nations. However, many historians believe the reason for the Soviet-led boycott was not only retaliation for the 1980 boycott, and instead was far more nuanced in nature. Philip Degatti and other scholars completely dismissed the official Soviet excuses which cited security concerns for their athletes. Instead, whilst not dismissing the 1984 boycott as a means of payback, Degatti suggests that the Soviet-led boycott was also based on the Soviets' use of the Olympics as a competition between socialism and capitalism. According to Degatti, the Soviets felt that Moscow 1980 had successfully upstaged the previous 1976 Olympics held in Montreal, Canada, given that Montreal had been plagued with financial difficulties and disorganized construction efforts. The 1984 Olympics were even more capitalistic than previous games, given that they were heavily privately funded by large corporate sponsors such as McDonald's. As such, in a reflection of the wider socialist versus capitalist competition that the Cold War was based on, the Soviet Union boycotted Los Angeles in an attempt to undermine these heavily capitalistic Olympics and therefore stress the superiority of socialism. The Soviet-led boycott did little to undermine the 1984 Olympics, given they were a great success for Los Angeles and an example of how capitalism could work to successfully privately fund and profit from the Games. In conclusion, the 1980 and 1984 Olympics served to both reflect and heighten Cold War tensions for various reasons. The 1980 Olympics were marred by a US-led boycott in protest of the Soviet Union's human rights violations and subsequent invasion of Afghanistan. Tensions rose again as the 1984 Olympics were boycotted by the Soviet Union and its allies, partially in retaliation for the 1980 boycott and also out of an attempt to undermine the Los Angeles Games. Both boycotts failed to achieve their stated and unstated goals, only serving to reflect and increase Cold War tensions whilst robbing athletes of their chance to take part in the Olympics.